Here today on a residential TPO roof, adhered down to its layer of insulation on top, which means that we're going to start our very first issue on every TPO roof: plating. Every single ply roof is required to plate 6 inches back from the corner. That's about 4 inches. That's about 3 inches. 3 and 4, 4, 5, 4, 4. So yet again, just like every roof we've looked at, the plating for the insulation is done wrong. This is probably one of the most common installation failures on flat roofs. Now that one there, you can actually see the brown dot is starting to form. That is a screw that was not fully fastened down, so that's an issue. Now we've got some peel and stick TPO over a gravel stop. I really shouldn't go up the gravel stop like that, but if you do, you know, it's not going to be a humongous deal. Staggered on the fasteners, I like it. So that should have had a dab of sealant at the end of it to make sure it's watertight. Same here, that should have had sealant. That's a cut in the roof. T-joint. Now, depending on what year this was installed, sometimes they would have required that caulking be installed underneath and rolled out. Sometimes they would have preferred that this be welded. Sometimes they would have let you roll it with a stitcher. Sometimes they want you to T-patch it. Sometimes they want you to seal on top of it with white lab sealant. And it really depends on what year you're talking about and what manufacturer. In this case, if I'm judging the roof correctly, I'm going to say this looks like it's about 7, 8 years old. TPO, and you know, look at the seam tape there. That's definitely Carlisle or Versico or one of their equivalent. And so that 17, 18, yeah, that should have been a T-patch, if not lap sealant, depending on exactly when this was installed. So walking around here, more missing T-patches. We have a pipe boot. This is how you check for manufacturer. Certified fabricated accessory. I'll zoom in on that. So that is our Carlisle manufacturer tag. Nice clamps on it. Use the ones that came with the boot. Downside, not sure if you can see that. See how it's peeling? Can't use silicone on TPO. It doesn't stick well, and that's manufacturer requirement too. T-patch, 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 T-patch. So I'm not going to go over that, but they teed the middle here. Alligator welds, that's what that scarring's from. And so that's what happens when you use your roller and you're kind of leaning it sideways as opposed to flat. Red chalk on the seam, that'll never go away. Oh, that actually reminds me, on that pipe boot I can check the year. So that is a 2016 pipe boot. So this roof, what month? September 2016. So this was probably, looking at it, I'm going to say these guys don't keep a stock and probably bought it from a supplier. So I'm going to take a wild guess and say this was done in 17 or 18. More than likely. No cut edge sealant along the edge there. When you cut TPO, you have to put cut edge sealant, otherwise it can fail prematurely. I do like the look of their T-joints. I like the fact that they installed them. However, notice how those aren't tight, how those have those air gaps in there. So now, Carlisle brand. This is an ancient probe. See that? That's not done. That's not done. That one is done. So these two have openings in them that are going to leak over time. That's just a matter of time until it fails. Let's see here. They kind of mixed and matched plates. Now, if you notice, they go from circular to square plates. So this person uses more than one manufacturer up here. One of those is allowed by the manufacturer, the other one isn't. But that said, it's residential, so they're not going to call it out. And they probably wouldn't notice anyway, depending on who the inspector is. Poorly welded. Burn mark, burn, burn. This whole side should have been stripped in. Lift. They did pretty well on that part. Burn mark, burn mark. That wasn't welded at all. That's just a strip that was tacked on. No cut edge sealant. And if you look closely, there's a burn mark there from the bad welding. So they overheated the top, but didn't manage to roll it in. And that's the thing, that's what's going on here, is they heated it, but they were probably running their roller like this. They should have taken the sharp edge and pushed it in, or you can take a probe, push it in like that, or you can take a stitcher, which is my preferred method. Another burn mark, that one might actually go all the way through over time. This was a hand wrapped pipe, so one thing you always want to look out for with hand wrapped is 9 times out of 10. Yep, there it is. They never banded it, never properly sealed it shut. I don't know why they seem to have a problem doing that on hand wraps when it's the same detail when it's hand wrapped or prefabricated. Drain, no clamp on the drain, it's just sealed shut. Really, really poorly sealed shut. No T-joint, no T-joint, no T-joint. I'm gonna stop saying that because it's getting annoying for me. But no T-joint, no T-joint. See, I lied. Just like they probably did when they said that they knew what they were doing. This is unsupported membrane. So more than likely they welded over a burn mark or a hole. You can't use unsupported for that. Note these plates just changed for a third time. That's a smaller plate. Matter of fact, that's a raised plastic tape. That's a black plastic Duralast. They're little triangle shaped plates. I'll recognize it anywhere. So these guys do Duralast and TPO. That would explain the square plate. Mixed it in with the rounded ones. And that would explain these round plates. It also might explain why they don't understand the concept of T-patching. Because you don't have to T-patch Duralast. Well, you didn't have to at this time. I mean, rules change. Another patch. No cut edge on the drain. Probably a burn mark patched over with the wrong material. This cover looks like a prefabricated nightmare, to be honest. That's interesting. Cut, rounded corners, welded prior to being brought out here. Look at that. The seam matches up perfectly and they rifted it. This was pre-welded, then they did this, but that doesn't cover it enough. There's screw patterns. That's not who I think it is. But I actually know who used to fabricate those around here. I'm wondering if they purchased that from A&D as opposed to from a manufacturer of any kind. So their seams are pretty decent, but still have openings all over. So they probably used a walking welder on here. They definitely used a walking welder on here. Then every time that welder hits a plate, which there's glue right there, every time that welder hits a plate, you have to put a roller and hand roll that in because it doesn't have the pressure properly applied. And there should be a start and stop somewhere. These are hand welded. No cut edge, red chalk, no cut edge, red chalk. Gap in the gravel stop. No bands around here at all. Wide open. Ooh, perfect example. So they used butyl sealant behind it. Now, butyl, that's what that gray is. That's water cutoff mastic. And that's great. That's what you want underneath there before you put the band, and then you trim it down to that band so it's a nice even shape. And then you caulk it. Oh, I recognize that caulking anywhere. Kind of looks like urethane at first glance, like a fresher urethane, but it doesn't actually stick to the TPO. That's Duracaulk, Duralast brand caulking. Positive of it. So yep, it's a Duralast contractor, which narrows it down to about 8 contractors locally. But that butyl can't be exposed to air, and if the butyl comes out and mixes with this caulking, it deteriorates it. So what they should have done is chalked a line on here, put butyl below that line, and don't use red chalk for God's sake, especially not on metal. Red chalk actually contains iron oxide, which is rust, the compound for rust, and that's how they get the red color in a lot of chalks. So they could have either done that, or they could have sealed around it with butyl, welded an extra strip down, which, given how bad this weld is, that's probably what I would have done, or told them to do, and then banded it. They didn't do any of that. There's a cut. That's old cut. Can't tell me that's new from recent damages, because look at the dirt marks in it. So that's something that happened probably during the installation. More burn marks. No clamp. Burn. Hey, that one's first unsupported over unsupported. I've seen them actually weld. Right here, they put a cut and they welded unsupported over it because it wasn't big enough. That actually has to be field membrane because it's a cut, and then you can put unsupported over that for the T-joints. They were probably just trying to avoid. Poorly welded. That's better. That's not welded. That's not finished. Poorly welded. And we continue. None of the edge was ever finished. Split boot. That tells me probably 2018, maybe 17, when those boots were common practice. These things suck. They always burn right here, or you don't weld them all the way. See that? That's a burn mark. Oh, they clamped this one because it came with the clamp. Pipe boots look pretty welded. These pipe boots with the double-sided white are one of the only things that you can actually like bleed out on TPO. You can't have bleed on the black portions. And you know, that's why you T-joint these. Or caulk them, or depending on what you manufacture. Now these, because they're made out of your reinforced membrane, you're actually supposed to T-patch that. Fun fact. And you also have to T-patch the front here, and you also have to T-patch the back for this particular year. Now they have since changed that, made it much better, but during that time period you were required to put those patches there. So what I would have done is one patch here, one patch here. And we have another drain. This one wasn't flashed at all. Looks like they just caulked it, and then yeah, that's it. They just caulked it in. Yikes. And they probably cut a hole for it right there. Missed it, so they put in a field patch. No cut edge. And so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 patches, no cut edge. Now once you hit 7, what you'd normally do is just replace, you know, a clean square to go around all of them. Get them all at once. Every manufacturer has a different rule. Carlisle usually says no more than 7 patches. So let's see. Overall, the installation's done wrong. The gravel stop has no clip in it, clearly. I mean, you can tell how warped it is from there. How much are sticking up, how much are laying flash. Perfect example. No clip. Once you go above 1.5 inch face, you're going to need a clip, or this is going to happen. And that's going to happen. And those are going to happen. So overall, gravel stop should be fixed. They need to now fasten the face of it or replace it. Their choice. Doesn't really matter which. Tons of T-joints need to be done. You know, honestly, those pipes could be fixed if they clean it and cut edge things. That cut edge is required by the manufacturer, but as far as getting into whether or not it's required to prevent leaks and stuff like that, that's a whole nother conversation. It's a good thing to have. You're required it for warranty. Whether or not it actually helps is up to debate. You've got 3 drains slashed wrong. You've got 3 large pipes slashed wrong. You've got the wrong kind of sealant on all 7 flashings. The wrong type of sealant on all 3 drains, and the drains aren't even flashed. Overall, and the red chalk, that's just a pet peeve. Some manufacturers might, you know, throw a little hissy, but that's going to be that individual representative. And we have to remember there's a whole roof. So overall, what I recommend this roof, the installation being wrong is pretty standard. Fastening the outside of the metal will look ugly, but isn't, you know, it isn't doing it wrong. It isn't going to do anything that's going to be a massive hassle. It's not doing anything that's going to damage anything, and it's still fixable at this point. Resealing and redoing the tops of the pipes, doing the extra T-joints, all that's pretty simple. Overall, I would not recommend this roof for replacement. I could just off of the insulation. Just that line right there. Just because all the insulation's plated wrong. But that's what somebody that's somebody that reads the rules and doesn't understand how they actually function. Generally speaking, this is repairable. And the only thing I would say as far as the wind goes, the other thing that really bothers me is that this is a high wind zone. It sits much higher than any building west of it, which is where the worst of the wind comes from. And there's pretty much nothing protecting it from that wind except for that tree there, which should be trimmed back 10 feet. That's actually pretty good. But overall, given the category, because of this exposure here, I would be concerned about wind. But instead, I would just say, you know, if this fails due to wind, it's definitely the contractor's fault, given how poorly it was installed for the insulation plating. But I don't think that's ever going to happen. You know, I might be sitting here complaining about they put the plates in the wrong spot, which is an important factor. But if you break it down, it looks like they, put 3, 2, 3, 2, 3. Huh. They put 13 plates in a board. I am now positive I know who did this. I know that pattern. Duralast and Carlisle products. Using that pattern in this area. That narrows it down to 2 contractors, and one of them's dead. So yeah. It sucks when you walk out of the building. Actually, no, I'll check the permits record later, but I bet money who this is. I'm not going to put them on blast. You know, I'm only going to mention a contractor's name if they did a really good or really bad job, or if they're out of business. That's the standard I'm trying to uphold to this channel. I'm not trying to, because every roof has punch list items. Honestly, if I were to compare this to the average TPO roof, this is one of the better residential jobs I've seen in years as far as TPO goes. And the reason why is because this isn't a residential contractor that did it. This is a commercial contractor that did this, and they do residential as filler work on the side. And so this is their residential cruise work, which isn't awful, but it would never pass on a commercial job until those drains were fixed, that edge metal was fixed, these pipes were fixed, and the T-patches. I mean, the T-patches the manufacturer might miss. But that's another beautiful day up on a TPO roof. Those are some tips and tricks on what to look for. You know, never, just to touch on the insulation plating, I know I talk about this a lot. It's an issue. It is. That many plates, probably not going to be an issue. That category of exposure, yeah, maybe. But, you know, a lot of people like to put comments about, oh, will that affect anything? In this case, yes, maybe over time. What's going to affect it even more is that they're allowing the wind to get underneath the membrane at the drip edge. That's the big problem. That's the thing that they need to look out for. Once that's fixed, in comparison, the insulation plating means almost nothing. Now, one thing I will say is you can tell from the deterioration there, this is probably 50 mil. And that's just a common problem. You don't want ponding water, but the drain sits probably flush with the deck. And so that's what happens every time. By the time you end up building up the materials for that flashing, it's usually anywhere between 1/8 and 1/4 inch higher than when it started. And a lot of times people lay their insulation flush with the drain, not realizing that it'll make the drain higher. This is actually a huge problem with architects and engineers and general contractors not understanding the very most basic concepts of roofing, but being the ones who write things up and design them. It really is driving me insane though. Duralast and Carlisle is Duracaulk. and they had to be big enough because there's no way, looking at the flashings, there's no way this is 2016. So either they grabbed it from a supplier or they have a warehouse filled. But I'm going to say it's probably not a warehouse given the red chalk usage. And that's how I know, because there's a company around here, I'll use their initials, CCR. And if you used red chalk on their roof this year, or the year that this was installed, they would have literally grabbed your chalk. Any one of the foremans or the QC guy would have grabbed that chalk and they would have chucked it right into the backyard there. You would have never seen that chalk line again. They were so against red chalk, and I have to agree. Red chalk doesn't fade and it produces rust if it touches metal. So I fully agree. Red chalk is a bad thing. Anywho,